Okay, so philosophy courses very often start with Plato's Republic, and this is for good reason. Firstly, many of the themes, many of the arguments that we see in Plato's Republic, we find in later philosophers discussed and debated. So firstly, that's a good reason why this is a good introduction to philosophy. But secondly, the way it's written, you have the narrator, Socrates, I'm not sure exactly how I should say that. I'm going to say Socrates. He is clearly Plato's, perhaps his hero of argument, his philosopher hero, someone who he looked up to, let's put it like that. And Socrates is having a debate, a discussion with some of his friends. And he talks to many different characters during the Republic. And really, he's constantly asking these other characters questions, such as, what is justice? Is life harder in old age? He actually asks them lots and lots and lots of questions. And so it gives the student it puts them in the position of the person who Socrates is asking these questions to. And so you really have to answer these questions. And so it's a good book. It certainly gets you thinking about some really common philosophical themes, and perhaps the most important philosophical themes. So the book one starts with an older character, Cephalus, a rich old man, and Socrates asks him, is life harder in old age? And Cephalus gives his answer. He explains that, in his opinion, it depends on your disposition. It depends on whether you've been a good man or not. And this is because he says, as you get closer to death, you either start to fear what comes afterwards, because you might be punished if you've been an unjust man, or you start to feel hope that you will be rewarded because you've been a just man. So something which kind of involves a belief in the afterlife as well. But he mentions fear and hope in relation to justice and a lack of justice, injustice. And so he seems to think that some people will find life easier in old age, those who have been just men, and some people will find life harder. And then they talk a little bit about how wealth might colour his perception. And I think it's Socrates, but I'm not entirely sure. Do read book one. This is supposed to be an introduction, but just to introduce you to the themes, really. So I think it's Socrates says, aren't people cynical? And don't they think that maybe it's your wealth that has made life easier in old age? And he actually asks Cephalus, what is the greatest blessing of wealth? And Cephalus responds that the greatest blessing is being able to be a just man. It's one can speak the truth and pay all one's debts. And so this is what he takes as a definition of justice, that one can be honest with people when you're wealthy, and you can pay all your debts, and this is the just man, this is the good man. And so he understands why some people would be cynical and say it's your wealth. And Socrates actually asks him, was your wealth inherited or acquired? And he asks him this because he understands that people who have inherited wealth are more indifferent to money, whereas people who have acquired wealth in their life have a love of money. Okay, and so you might want to ask yourself those questions. Do you agree with that? Do you agree that people who inherited money, inherited their wealth, do you agree they are indifferent to money? And do you agree that people that acquired it in their own lives, do you agree that they have a love of money? You may disagree, and I'm interested to hear your opinions always. So please put them in the Q&A or the discussion sections, and I'll certainly read them and respond. So this is what he claims is a definition of justice. And Socrates asks, well, what is justice? And he gives an example of why he thinks this is not justice. And this is the Socratic method. He looks at what people claim, so they claim that this is justice, and then he examines these claims to see if they contradict in certain situations. And if they contradict, he believes all claims can be shown to be true or false simply by analysing them. And so he gives the example of when a friend lends you some weapons, yeah, and then that friend goes mad. Is it justice to pay your debt and give them back the weapon? Or would that be would that be unjust in some kind of way? And they agree with Socrates that this would be unjust. This is a good example of why pay all your debts is not a good definition of justice because of this example. Okay, and so he does this quite often, give these kind of examples where he shows that this is contradictory then. It can't be justice to give somebody who's not of their right mind a weapon and then they might kill somebody or kill themselves. That wouldn't be just at all. That wouldn't be an example of the good man. So somebody else, I think it's Polemarchus, I think that's Cephalus's son, I believe, he says, well, let's give a different definition.